Art Silver Stacker here. Hope you're doing well. So, we have a major development today in the global economy, in the geopolitical arena. Saudi Arabia has joined BRICS, and it's not just Saudi Arabia, there's a host of other countries now which will be joining the global south in the BRICS organization in their attempts to provide a counterweight to U.S. global hegemony. And we're going to get into that in today's video. It's a bit of a hot take. This is breaking news. So I've got some notes here, and we're just going to go over what this could mean for the dollar's status as the world reserve currency, for the petrodollar system, which has underpinned that status for the past 5 decades. And this really is a monumental development here, perhaps the biggest development of 2023. We've got R. Schroeder in the chat there saying, we knew it would happen. Certainly, it's not a huge surprise to those of you out there who have been following this channel, I am sure, but this confirmation is a big deal. So earlier today, we had an announcement from the BRICS organization at their 2023 summit being held in South Africa that Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, as well as Ethiopia, Argentina, and the UAE, will all be joining BRICS. Now, this doesn't kick in right away. They have officially been invited to join. They will be become official members on January 1st of 2024. So there might be some delay in some of these massive changes that will likely come about as a result of this. For the precious metals, certainly this will have a large impact on the precious metals because it will have a large impact on the dollar, very likely. The dollar, is the currency that all of the OPEC nations use for their oil transactions. But now that some of the world's biggest oil producers, you've got Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the UAE all joining the BRICS organization, that system may be coming to an end. And that means there will be significantly less demand for the dollar around the world. And this obviously has some pretty big implications for those of us who are interested in stacking the precious metals, which oftentimes move as an inverse to the US dollar. And today's video is sponsored by sdbullion.com. If you're interested in getting your hands on some precious metals, make sure you check them out with the link down in the description. And new customers right now can get gold or silver at spot by visiting sdbullion.com/new. So make sure you check them out. That's where I buy my gold and silver. So let's get into this story here. First of all, I thought it was interesting that Brazil's President Lula, who had been sort of viewed as one of these holdouts against BRICS expansion, that was how he was being portrayed in the media, he came out with a statement saying globalization has failed, and it was important that the BRICS organization revitalize cooperation among developing countries because of, and this is kind of an ominous warning from him, because of the potential risk of nuclear war. Putin, his statement included a portion where he said, I would like to assure all of our colleagues that we will continue the work that we have started today on expanding the influence of BRICS in the world. And of course, Putin and Xi Jinping from China, one of their big objectives here is to create a counterpoint to the G7 and Western, what they view as Western global hegemony. Trying to keep my coverage here objective and balanced, But again, this doesn't come as a huge surprise, but it is a confirmation of a very ominous trend that we are witnessing here, and that is a trend away from the petrodollar system. Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan, he commented that Saudi Arabia will be a secure and reliable energy provider. And he also pointed out that bilateral trade between Saudi Arabia and the BRICS exceeded $160 billion last year, and that number likely growing. Of course, China, Saudi Arabia's biggest trading partner, the biggest purchaser of their crude. And that's a reason why this petrodollar system, which was set up, by the Nixon administration, by Kissinger back in the 1970s between the U.S. and the Saudis, this arrangement where the Saudis only price their oil sales in dollars, that's a huge bulwark for the dollar status. It's probably coming to an end, folks. Maybe not right now. Maybe it'll be 2024. In fact, if I had to bet, I would say that we will see the first Oil sales from Saudi Arabia to China denominated in yuan probably next year, considering the fact that they won't officially be joining this organization until January 1st. But, this kind of Hail Mary attempt by the Biden administration to revitalize relations with the Saudis via this Saudi Israel US deal, this is likely a toast now. I mean, I was commenting in a recent live stream about how the recent Human Rights Watch report about Saudi Arabia and how they've been killing migrants crossing their border would put a lot of pressure on that deal. Well, certainly Saudi Arabia joining the Brics organization also will make that deal that much less likely to materialize. So despite the fact that the current administration has basically acknowledged that the risks to the petrodollar are significant. That's why we're kind of dangling a nuclear power program for Saudi Arabia as bait. Um, it's a huge indication that, they're acknowledging that this is a big risk, but clearly it's perhaps bigger than any of us realized. Although, to be fair, we've been talking about this a lot on this channel and in the stacking community. Mainstream media kind of downplaying the risk to the petrodollar, but I think now it's going to be impossible to ignore now that both the UAE and Saudi Arabia are joining Brics. Of course, the UAE, they've already begun selling their oil in non-dollar currencies. They sold a million barrels of crude oil to India for a rupee. And now that they're part of the Brics organization, how many of those sales to India or China from the UAE, how many of those do you think are going to remain denominated in dollars? Not very many. And of course, the US imports very little oil from the Middle East these days. And so the dollar doesn't make as much sense to be conducting all of this oil trade in dollars. Now, I want to look at this chart. This is a chart of the GDP of the Brics organization versus the G7 and the West here. And you can see that it's projected to grow, and it's already surpassed that of the G7. Well, think about what this chart is going to look like now that these 6 nations, including 3 of the world's biggest oil producers and exporters, have joined their ranks. I mean, the GDP of the Brics, their economic clout is only growing, and that should be somewhat alarming to anybody who relies on the dollar in a significant way. And again, this isn't going to be an instant blow to the dollar, but it's kind of this death by 1,000 cuts thing that we've been witnessing with this de-dollarization trend. However, this is by far the biggest cut yet, and you can't take too many cuts like this without beginning to potentially lose your reserve status. Now, of course, we've been seeing the lead up to this. This is not, coming out of left field. We did have the Saudi Aramco CEO telling the Chinese 2 years ago now that they would prioritize producing energy for China for the next 50 years. It would be their top priority. Well, that clearly is going to continue to be the case now that they're going to be part of this economic alliance. Let's take a look at this. This is a list of the country's top oil exporters and top oil producers here on Wikipedia. This is actually a top oil exporters. And let's just look through and see, how much of this oil now will potentially be sold for non-dollar currencies. You got Saudi Arabia, top of the pack there. Very likely that they may begin selling some oil for, who knows, yuan, rupee. I mean, they sell a lot of oil to India. They sell a lot of oil to China. They're in Brics. We know Brics has been talking about switching to non-dollar currencies for a long time, trading in local currencies. So, only a matter of time. Russia already has thoroughly de-dollarized their oil and gas trade. They're the world's number 2 exporter. They've been selling a ton of gas to China, a ton of oil to India, and they are doing all of that in bilateral trade with their local currencies, rupees, yuan, and rubles. You got Iraq, the number 3 exporter. They're still not part of Brics. They have notably de-dollarized a lot of their trade with China, except for the oil trade. But the petrodollar thing, it centers on Saudi Arabia, but it's not just Saudi Arabia. The thing is that Saudi Arabia is sort of the de facto leader of OPEC because they are the world's biggest oil exporter. And so what Saudi Arabia does, the rest of OPEC, they will follow. And so that's why Saudi Arabia is such a critical linchpin here. If they begin selling their oil for non-dollar currencies, all of these OPEC nations, whether they're part of Brics or not, may follow suit. You got Iraq. Okay, you got United States and Canada. They'll probably still be selling their oil for dollars. But then the next up, UAE, they're joining Brics. They're already selling gas for yuan. That was earlier this year. They sold 65,000 tons of their natural gas to China via French energy company Total Energy, who brokered the deal, and that was paid for in yuan. And they just sold oil, like I said, to India for rupees. You got Kuwait. Again, they're an OPEC member, so they'll probably follow Saudi Arabia's lead. Let's see what else we got. We got Angola, Libya, Iran. Now, Iran, part of the BRICS organization. So you can see where this is heading. The global trade of oil exclusively for dollars is going to be coming to an end very soon. I think we can say that with confidence now that we have witnessed this most recent development today of the Saudis and the Iranians and the UAE joining BRICS. I mean, it's only a matter of time. And that really is going to be a huge problem. It's coming at the worst time possible for the U.S. because the dollar is already under tremendous pressure. Inflation remains high. The Fed is cranking up rates. We've got a very fragile economy. We got all these banks, regional banks, being downgraded. You've got the Treasury issuing new debt at a record pace. We're running a $2 trillion deficit this year. We're on track to do that. Something like a 170% increase over last year's deficit. So, who's going to buy all this debt? Well, the petrodollar had a pretty good source for all of that debt to get bought up. It was everybody who sells their oil for dollars. They go into the U.S. Treasuries market and they buy U.S. debts. Part of the reason that the U.S. has been able to borrow so much and grow so much faster than the rest of the world. Silver Husky says, so did they join or are they talking about joining? No, they have officially been invited to join. So it's essentially going to occur now. The BRICS organization announced it today at their 2023 summit. However, they won't officially become members until January 1st. So even though this is basically guaranteed now, it appears, at least that's my take on it. Again, this is breaking news, so this is a bit of a hot take. But they are joining. It is confirmed. It's just going to be a couple more months before they formalize it. Who knows? Maybe we'll see them dump dollars for their oil trade before January 1st. I'm not sure. But after January 1st, I think that we can expect that will happen in short order. Very interesting. This is an interesting one. And this has to do with the precious metals. This is a direct tie-in to gold in this case. We'll get to silver in a moment. But the fact that Saudi Arabia and Iran have both joined BRICS, in light of this story, this is one we got in January of this year, but it's one that, you don't hear too much about since this announcement. But there was a report reported on by Markets Insider that Russia and Iran, their central banks, are working or have been working on a gold-backed stablecoin cryptocurrency specifically for cross-border payments to replace the dollar. So, there's been a lot of speculation about a BRICS currency being announced at this meeting. That doesn't seem to have manifested itself so far. Today's the final day of the summit. Maybe we'll get some kind of a statement regarding a currency. Who knows? But even if we don't, the fact that Iran and Saudi Arabia are both joining the BRICS team, maybe this gold stablecoin currency is going to play some kind of a role in the oil trade moving forward. And, it's important to remember that this currency that the BRICS may be using, whether it be a gold-backed stablecoin currency or a currency basket or all these things, it doesn't have to be for individuals to trade in. Maybe it's only for cross-border settlement. Maybe it's only for nations to settle international bilateral trade. So it's not necessarily what you might think. They might not be coming out with a new BRICS dollar or BRICS currency unit that you would go out and buy things with, or citizens of the BRICS nations would go out and buy things with. It may only be for settling international trade, but that's the real threat to the dollar, is that right now a lot of this international trade, the vast majority of it, still gets settled in dollars, although that percentage is waning significantly. I mean, we've seen tremendous amounts of de-dollarization, and this is just an absolutely massive development, the biggest one so far. As I said, death by 1,000 cuts, but this is a pretty bad cut. Now, Why is this interesting for silver? Well, here's a chart that I talked about yesterday on the live stream. This one's from Clive Mod. Now, I don't get too into technical analysis. I had somebody put in the comments yesterday's live stream that it's kind of like just reading tea leaves. And yeah, I kind of agree with that. I mean, I'm not a huge proponent of technical analysts, but there are some patterns which I think are valid. And this is an interesting one. It's a long-term chart of the price of silver, and you can see there's a big cup and handle formation there, which is on the verge of a breakout. And it's very interesting that we're seeing the petrodollar system and the dollar status as the world reserve currency come under threat, just as you're seeing formations like that completing in the charts of the precious metals. And I had somebody point out in the comments on that video that this cup and handle formation is actually like a fractal pattern, and it's just a handle to a much bigger cup and handle formation on the very long-term silver chart going back to the previous 1980 highs. I haven't really pulled out any charting tools, but I did think that was an interesting point, so thank you for whoever left that comment. I thought that was pretty neat. Let's see. So, again, this is not a huge surprise to us, and I want to talk about what is coming next, because sure, okay, Saudi Arabia joins Brics. On its face, that's not the end of the dollar, not that big of a deal, but we got to look at that in light of previous developments here. So this is a story reported on by the Wall Street Journal last year in March. Saudi Arabia considers accepting yuan instead of dollars for Chinese oil sales. So this was immediately following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. There was a considerable amount of de-dollarization talk going around at that time. We had commodities thrown into, a bit of a tizzy. We saw the spike in nickel. We saw the spike in palladium. And Saudi Arabia talked about accepting yuan from China. So this is not, just conspiracy theory, speculation. I mean, you got to listen when these people talk. When they tell you that they're thinking about accepting yuan for their oil instead of dollars, they're really considering it. I mean, it's not even a veiled threat. It's just an open threat. And then more recently, this is something we talked about a lot, but this is the Saudi finance minister who said earlier this year that Saudi Arabia is open on talks to trading in currencies beside the US dollar. And again, this is not so much a veiled threat. This is just an open deprecation of the petrodollar system. And then last year in December, of course, we had China's Xi Jinping calling for these Gulf states, which now have joined Brics, to trade their oil and gas in yuan on the Shanghai Petroleum Exchange. So we can see where this is going. Michael Harding says, I don't buy it. I'm not sure what you're referring to there, if it's specifically just to Saudi Arabia joining Brics. You don't buy any of it. Okay. Well, I mean, you can live in denial when it comes to this stuff, and I don't mean that in a sarcastic or snarky or annoying way. It's just that, I mean, they've been telling us for a long time that they are going to dump the dollar, and accept non-dollar currencies. And if it's cryptocurrency that you're skeptical of specifically, yes, I understand being skeptical of things like, Bitcoin perhaps, or a Dogecoin or any of those things. But a state-sponsored cryptocurrency that's backed by gold that is being designed for international trade, I mean, the fact that it's a cryptocurrency just shows that it is a, modern development, kind of in line with the CBDCs that we're seeing developed. I mean, currency is going to go digital. To me, that's just another reason to be getting into hard assets that are outside of the digital financial system. Now, some people tell me, that CBDCs and stuff like that will negate the value of gold and silver, but I think that, in fact, it will make them more valuable. Let me know your take on that in the chat. I would always appreciate to get your take. Yes, and thank you, X9523, who says in the chat, hit that like button. Yeah, if you're enjoying this video so far, you find like you're getting some value from it, please do smash that like button. Consider subscribing to the channel. Tell your friends. This is one of the most important developments of 2023, folks. It may fly under the radar here. Again, this is breaking news, kind of a hot take, so we'll have to see how the mainstream media covers this. But this is a huge threat to the dollar status as the world reserve currency, getting the world's biggest oil exporters and producers, the leaders of OPEC, into an organization which pretty clearly is set up as a counterpoint to Western hegemony. I mean, they tell us as much. Sure, you had, Brazil's Lula telling us yesterday that that's not the purpose of BRICS. It's just to organize ourselves. It's not supposed to rival the G7. Well, Brazil wants to try to walk a thin line and maintain relations with the U.S. and the West, but I think that that is just a cover for what's really going on here. I mean, yes, yeah, the contrast with Sepia Prince says, I've got to read Oil Money. Yeah, I would recommend this book to anybody who would like to understand the petrodollar system better. I mean, it's full of very interesting anecdotes from the time, small things that, you might not think about some of the folks who were funded by petrodollars. Like the guy who founded Al Qaeda. His dad's construction company was a Saudi construction company, and he got a lot of his wealth from petrodollar projects, construction projects that were financed with petrodollar revenues. So, there's a very interesting history behind this whole petrodollar thing. But the important thing for us and for most people here, if you're not, too keen on the history, is that this is a fundamental backbone of the dollar status around the world. I mean, it is how the global system works right now, and that is all about to change very likely. And you got to keep in mind that when the system changes, when these massive changes are on the way, you're not going to hear about it in the mainstream. I mean, their whole purpose is damage control, to control perceptions, to try to keep everybody, cheerleading for the dollar. And if you want to try and take an objective view of things, just consider the incentives here for the various parties aligned. Is Saudi Arabia better served by maintaining a 50-year-old strategic alliance with the U.S., who they hardly conduct any trade with any longer? Or are they better served to look to new regional partners who can provide them the kind of security guarantees that, in their view, they can rely on? I mean, the Saudis, you might have noticed that their tone changed considerably regarding their U.S. strategic partnership when the U.S. had their bungling withdrawal from Afghanistan. I mean, that didn't instill a lot of confidence in the Saudis regarding the U.S. ability to provide them security. And that is a huge component of why they've signed up for the petrodollar system in the first place, is because they want security guarantees. They want U.S. weaponry. We covered a story in a recent live stream about how the Saudis now, they've stopped buying F-15 fighter jets and they've begun buying French fighter jets because they're not so sure that the U.S. will be a reliable partner moving forward. And they have good reason to believe that. When they cut oil production last year, you had Joe Biden begging MBS, oh, please don't cut oil production until after the elections. Help me fight U.S. inflation. And the Saudis disregarded that. There was this huge bipartisan move, both houses, or both parties in Congress, talking about cutting off weapon shipments to the Saudis, imposing all of these, punishments on them. I think Biden had this kind of cryptic comment where he said there would be consequences for the Saudis. Of course, he's completely changed his tone since that time, because he's probably beginning to realize that in today's environment, the U.S. may actually need Saudi Arabia more than Saudi Arabia needs the U.S. And so now, we're offering them nuclear programs. There's no consequences for them cutting oil production. We're trying to get them involved in this new deal, this Hail Mary play to save the petrodollar. The deal being that, the Palestinians get concessions from the Israelis. The U.S. gives the Saudis new weapons, new guarantees, nuclear programs. It's like Christmas morning for the Saudis, and all they have to do is continue accepting U.S. dollars for their oil instead of Chinese yuan. And they have to limit their affiliation with China. They've got to stop using Huawei technology and things like that as part of the deal. But clearly, they're not going to sign on to this. I mean, if they wanted to pursue their relationship with the U.S. as their primary strategic partner, why would they join BRICS? And this is something just that we all need to be paying attention to. If you haven't gotten your hands on some precious metals and some hard assets yet, some, diversification out of the dollar, I don't give financial advice on this channel, but to me, this is a huge indication that the dollar's days are numbered. And it's not like the dollar is going to be going away. It'll probably be around in some form, but will it be the world reserve currency? Will it have anything like the purchasing power that it has today? Those are the big questions. Yeah, we'll still have dollars. Will a loaf of bread cost 500 of them? Maybe. People say all the time when I talk about gold and silver as a hedge against, currency devaluation, they say, oh, well, silver might go to $1,000, but if it does, then, a loaf of bread will be 1,500. And it's like, well, okay, then at least I'll still be able to buy a loaf of bread with some silver because the dollars that you're holding aren't going to be able to do much. So that just, to me, yes, if silver rises in value, probably the price of all other tangible goods will as well. But at least you'll be able to still, have a form of money that you can use as opposed to devalued paper fiat currencies. But that's my take on this development, folks. Thank you so much for tuning into today's video. I'll probably do a follow-up video to this one soon as we see the repercussions of this play out. Again, I don't think that they're going to be immediate because January 1st is the date we're going to have to look to, and then some kind of a development that will follow the official induction of Brics in these countries into the Brics organization. So, one of the things that I think a lot of us in this community are guilty of is sometimes we kind of jump the gun. We say, oh, this date is going to be the time. But the trend is the thing you have to pay attention to here. And this is not a good trend for the dollar. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Stay safe, everybody. Happy stacking. And I will catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker out.